Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast. This is the Security Awareness Series in episode 219. I'm Chris Hadnaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009. And of course, with this series, everyone knows my trusty co-host is none other than Ryan McDougall. Ryan, thanks for being here with me today.
Thanks, Chris. Just a reminder, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Social Engineer. I'm also the co-trainer of the Master's Level Social Engineering and Red Team Labs offerings at SECom. I've taught multiple classes and for multiple years across several public and private events. I've been in the information technology field for almost 26 years. I feel old. And the last 10 years has been focused on adversary simulation and security awareness. Thanks.
You don't look old enough to have that resume, but, I say that all the time. So we'll just
I shave all the gray off most of the time.
I need to learn how to do that. Man, I need to learn how to do that. Okay, guys, quick announcement about our sponsor, which is Social Engineer. I got some really exciting things that you can check out on the website. We have our training schedule. We have a class coming up in July. So if you are listening to this, you could still sign up for that class here in Orlando. That's the foundational aspect of social engineering class. We have one more of those in Bucharest, Romania in September. But also, there's a couple webinars we're going to be promoting on the website. The dates and all the information will be out there. But first one will be about social engineering and AI. What do we see for the future in that? And the second will be all about the state of phishing and analyzing the data that is in that report and what you can do as a company to protect yourself from the threat of phishing. Those will be free webinars out on the website. You can go to social-engineer.com, find out the date, sign up for them. We look forward to seeing you at both of those events. If you're interested in the topic of social engineering, then you should definitely be part of our Slack channel. So if you don't know how to get in there, you can find it in the show notes, or you can ping Ryan or I on LinkedIn or any other social media, and we'll get you the channel there. It's free to join. We encourage you to come in. It's a family-friendly legal chat all about social engineering. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, you should come in and join us. We have about 1,500 people on there now every day talking about pretexting, phishing, vishing, all parts of the psychology of social engineering. We even have an employment board where companies come in and post jobs, and people who are looking for work can come in and post that they're looking for work. We've had 10 people find new employment by joining the Slack channel. So if you're interested in that, please come on in. We'd love to have you be part of the group there. And I want to invite everyone who's listening to take a moment to go visit innocentlivesfoundation.org. Really excited about some of the things that are happening over there. If you're not familiar with Innocent Lives, or ILF as we call it, it's a nonprofit that was started almost 6 years ago. Our mission is to help law enforcement track and geolocate people who traffic children and who create child abuse material. And in the almost 6 years, we're up to 500 cases now that we've been able to help law enforcement with, and finding people who do hurt kids and helping law enforcement stop them. We're not a vigilante group. I want to really stress that. So we work with the law. We always stay above the law. We don't do anything illegal. And our mission is to help stop people who are hurting kids. And for the first time ever, we're running a gala in September out in Los Angeles, in Burbank. You can find the details on innocentlivesfoundation.org. I'm really excited because our host is none other than LeVar Burton. And I'm really excited to get to hang out with him and meet him and raise awareness for what we're doing there with ILF. So if you're interested in any of those resources, you want to volunteer, either you can come work with us at the ILF, or if you want to donate to the mission, you can find out about the gala and how to support us on innocentlivesfoundation.org. And last but not least, if you love the music that starts this podcast and ends this podcast, and you are none other than a fan of Clutch, the best rock and roll band on planet Earth. They're touring right now in Europe, if you're listening to this in July, so you can go check them out if you're over there. That's the best way to really take in their music, is go see them live. So I suggest you try that. And go pro-rock.com, listen to their songs. You're going to love it. You know it. You already do. Everybody does. There's no way you cannot love Clutch. Okay, let's get to our guest. I'm really excited about our guest. I want you to meet Ganesh Krishnan. He's a cybersecurity superhero. That's what we call him, with over 25 years. See, Ryan, this is what I mean. 25. You have 26. How is that possible? You look too young. When did you start? When you were 2? Okay. Well, Ganesh has 25 years of experience.
Ganesh looks young. I don't know what you're talking about.
I know. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, how do you have more than me and Ganesh? Doesn't make sense.
I look old. I was 8.
When you were 8.
I just shaved my beard. So.
You see, he shaved all the gray off. That's what happened. Okay. Well, Ganesh has 25 years of experience as protecting the digital world from cyber threats. threats. He helped start 2 different companies with a track record of success at some of the world's top tech companies. He's earned a reputation as a thought leader in the forefront of cybersecurity. Now he's at the helm of a company called Anzenna, or Anzenna?
Anzenna. Yeah.
And his latest security startup, he's out to revolutionize the industry. And this is why we have him here today, because all about making cybersecurity accessible to everyone, not just a security team, which of course is something we're passionate about here at Social Engineer and on this podcast. So Ganesh, thank you for joining us today here on the Social Engineer podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show, and glad to be here and hope to have a great discussion.
So let's start off with who you are. Like, how did you get to where you are? This nice bio sounds like you've been starting companies up or helping companies be secure for quite a long time. What started you on that path?
Yeah, so I started my journey sort of in the corporate world in 96 after my master's at Purdue, when I was a research assistant at one of the security labs back when very few people knew what security was. And then I happened to join Intel Architecture Labs in Oregon, writing IPsec and IKE device drivers. Anybody who still uses that term, IP security, and the old style VPNs. And so was writing those for Windows 95 and 98. Nice. Believe it or not, like
R.I.P.
That never comes up. And then did that for some time, and then moved to the Silicon Valley because I was tired of the rain in Oregon back then. It just used to rain a lot. And so I wanted more sunny weather. So I moved down south and started working at this company called Securify, which was started by Tahir El-Gamal, who's a well-known security person behind the El-Gamal signature standard, which became the digital signature algorithm. And then he was on the committee at Netscape when they came up with SSL. So very luminary, still in the industry. So fortunate to have been associated with him. And so he worked. That was a security consulting company. So we used to do a bunch of work for different companies. And Yahoo was one of the companies we did work for. And then after a few years of consulting, sort of joined Yahoo in 2001, right after the .com bust, if anyone remembers that anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And so joined Yahoo as one of the their very early security folks. Again, most people didn't know what security was. I was doing part engineering work and part security work and coding and everything. And then, as I sort of spent some time at Yahoo, we actually built up an information security function. We coined we named ourselves Paranoids, and that became a brand, and it's still known, at least in the Silicon Valley area. And so spent 9 years and change at Yahoo, built their security function, was CISO at Yahoo when I left. And then joined LinkedIn in 2010 as LinkedIn was getting built as the social network, right alongside Facebook and others back then. And built their fraud detection, cybersecurity, InfoSec function, stayed there for some time, and then joined Atlassian in sort of 2016 to run their InfoSec and identity teams. And that's when I realized I had been doing this for too long. And if I kept doing the same thing, I would go native. And so I said, well, how can I do something different? But I was still passionate about security because security was, I was doing this already for almost 2 decades back by then. And so decided to sort of flip and say, okay, well, can I build a security product to help other companies and folks? And so started this cloud security company called Avid Secure in 2017. And about 18 months into it, we got acquired by Sophos. That was really interesting because Sophos is a 35-year-old security company, and I had always worked in the Valley, sort of fast-moving companies and so on and so forth. So I thought, and I was skeptical of joining a 35-year-old security company from a cultural standpoint. But I was pleasantly surprised. Sophos was a really good company to work for, really good people. I spent 3 years there. I enjoyed my time there. So it's almost like a lesson to me. space, like you don't really know what it's like until you actually go and spend time with the people, right? Don't just assume. And then early last year, 2022, I left Sophos because as an entrepreneur, once you start a company, every problem looks 10x bigger. And so I felt like I had lots more to contribute in the cybersecurity space. So left early last year, and then late last year ended up starting Anzenna, which I will of course tell you more about here today. So that's my background.
I love how you like nonchalantly went, "Oh yeah, I was there when we created SSL." Like you just kind of said that, like, "Yeah, I ate an apple this morning." "Oh yeah, I was there when we created SSL." Like I think you just kind of like bypass this little part of like history, like changing the universe for what it was today.
Yeah, well, I wasn't there, but Tahir El-Gamal was. Yeah. So so he was responsible for it. So I wasn't there. So yes, that was part of history. Yeah.
Still just a great. It sounds like you had a lot of awesome mentors over the years and the places that you've worked that helped kind of shape where you are today. That's really great history.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things that I see that you talk about and post and things like that is how important trust is when it comes to cybersecurity. Tell me a little more about that. Like, why do you feel trust is so important when we're talking about security awareness, cybersecurity, dealing with employees? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity traditionally has been like, hey, there are these experts over here in this corner and they're responsible for it. Right. That's how most companies still deal with it and think about it. Right. And we need to kind of change that completely to say, hey, if you look at cybersecurity, it affects every single thing that a company does. It's not just development. It's not just operations. It's not just IT. It's sales, it's marketing, it's HR, it's support, everything, right? So to say, okay, we'll just pin it on this small team of people who are always under-resourced, struggling to scale and hire people, it doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense, right? So when we talk about trust, we have to start with saying, hey, we have to make sure that every employee at the company feels that they're empowered and that they feel like cybersecurity, privacy, and the general trust umbrella is something that they're responsible for, right? They can't just say it's somebody else's problem, right? If you look at IT today, there's massive decentralization going on in IT, right? So businesses want their employees to sign up for whatever app they want to get more productive, whether that be OpenAI or whether that be, your Canva for designs or whatever, right? So it's no longer within four walls. So when businesses are comfortable with employees becoming their own mini CIOs, they should be right along there saying all employees should become mini CISOs for the stuff that they have to deal with, their own security posture. So I think internally, that's how I look at trust. And that's super important when it's not just for protecting breaches, it's also fostering a culture that then translates to building trustworthy products that actually are thoughtful in terms of privacy, security, and everything, which then reflects in how your customers perceive you, right? It's not just about, hey, trust is, I have a trust center and I have a bunch of logos saying, here are all my certifications. That's just a step point one, right? Yeah. The way that actually really ingrains into the organization is everything starts with employees, right? And I think we need to get them on our side. As security professionals, myself included, we have always considered employees as the weakest link. And we need to stop saying that. And we need to figure out how to be more inclusive and how to turn them into the strongest link and our allies. That's how we build real trust.
I love that message, by the way, because on this podcast, Ryan and I have been saying this now for years. I really hate phrases like there's no patch for human stupidity or your humans are the weakest link, because it really puts the onus saying like, well, if you fall for one of these things, you're just a dumb human. And we don't promote that with our clients or the people we work with or here internally. So I love that messaging.
Thank you.
Yeah. So given your history of kind of bringing security into all these different, what are now huge companies, how do you start that conversation of changing that culture in a company that maybe is established already? So like some of the listeners might be in a big company that has a security culture. How do you introduce those new concepts and get those conversations started?
Yeah. So whenever I think of culture, there's this famous Chinese proverb that comes to mind. It goes like this: tell me, I'll forget; show me, I'll remember; involve me, and I'll understand. Right? All three of them are important. You have to keep telling people something is important, and that's where most organizations are today. Security is important, but they forget because people have other incentives, right? If you go outside the security team, they're being judged on something completely different, right? Then we go into, okay, how can you show me so that I remember, right? So you've got all these simulations in place. People try to say, okay, I'll try to fish you and show you that you're, that this is important. And that's the next step. The ultimate step here is how can you involve employees when it comes to cybersecurity, privacy, and trust in their daily workflows, right? Can we build a system? And it's not just a system, by the way, and I'm just using this as an example. It's a set of messaging, processes, and systems that make this happen, right? So now if you take an example of a system, just because it makes it easy to understand, right? Today, we try to train employees all the time saying, hey, take cybersecurity awareness training once a year, once a quarter, it's mandated, right? It's like exercising once a year when you're facing cyber threats on every day. So you can't stay fit when you exercise once a year. It's just a fact, right? So how do you move from that model to say, hey, can we figure out what employees are doing on a day-to-day basis, right? A finance employee is doing something different compared to a developer, compared to someone else, right? And then can we figure out what mistakes they're making from a cybersecurity standpoint and reach out to them and say, hey, here is how to do this better. Here is how you can quickly undo this message, right? And thank you, and not make it punitive, but actually encourage them, incentivize them to participate in the system. That's when you can really say, okay, I'm involving you to help you understand. And that's where we need to be. And I think very few organizations are there. What I see today in the industry is things like security champions and programs like that, which are amazing. I've done them in the past. And you'll be amazed, right? Like all you have to do is announce, and there's so many volunteers that show up, right? When we as security professionals say, oh, employees don't care, that's patently false, because all you have to do is reach out to them, ask for help, be transparent, and you will see 10x more people than the size of your team showing up, right? So people are already moving in that direction to say, how do we decentralize this problem by champions and everything? And then we need to kind of tie this in with additional systems and context that reaches every single employee and kind of revolutionizes, changes how we do cybersecurity awareness and training and things. So that's how.
We did something once with a client, which I thought we tried it to see if it would work. And we offered to give a security awareness speech about how to keep your kids and your family safe. Mm-hmm. And at first the company was like, why do we want to do that? Like that's at home. And I'm like, because if you make them security conscious when they're not there, that's going to carry over to home. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we did that. We talked about how to secure your home network, how to keep your kids safe, how to keep their devices safe. And then they started asking, well, if we do that at home, shouldn't we be doing that at the company? And I was like, you see, there it is. Because we touched them where it was very personal for them. Mm-hmm. But like you, I don't hear this message out there a lot. So I'm really excited to hear somebody else who's been working with really large companies spreading this same kind of message, because we feel here that if we don't make it personal for the employee, then why would they care about security, right? So we need to make them care, because tell them this affects you everywhere you are, not just when you're here at my company. This affects you when you're at home, you're with your parents, your kids, everywhere.
That's right. And companies should be training their employees on how to be safe at home. Because like you said, exactly, that's a great message. It translates, what you do at work translates to home and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So it's super important. And that's such an important point. Completely agree.
So we already established that both of us, all of us here, we don't like the weakest link idea. Yeah. So how do you convert, like if you have a security team and this is the way they're thinking, right? So they're thinking, boy, these people, this is the problem. They're the weakest link. How do you start to change that thinking, not just in the employees, but in the security team?
Yeah. And I think it's always a challenge, right? So it's not easy to change culture. Culture is this amorphous thing that takes persistence and takes a long time to change. But it starts with a champion. It starts with somebody who cares about the problem and can think differently, right? And I think that can change minds over time. In terms of security teams, I think so far a lot of security teams tend to focus a lot on technology, and rightly so. And I think there needs to be a shift to say, hey, security is not just about technology; it's about people, process, and technology. And you have to look at the people angle. And we have been starting to see some changes, at least in teams that I talk to. Right, security teams were not considered enablers, and some security teams are saying, hey, how do I change so that the way I interact with the rest of the organization, so that I get perceived as a problem solver rather than a problem creator. And I think that's a great start. And I think that's how you start to say, okay, let me figure out what the organization's facing, what employees are facing, what teams are facing. And as I help them, that they would turn around and come to me for advice, which is great, because a lot of times teams are afraid to talk to security teams because, if I tell this to the security team, they'll block me. They won't let me do what I'm trying to do. You want to change that perception. So that's the starting point, is to interact. And is to have that sort of open door policy, if you will, and be transparent with the company, right? Most security teams like to operate in a corner and say, I've made all these technology changes and I've made all these blockings. Things must be fine. We need to flip that and say, how do we talk more about security? How do we be more transparent with the entire company about what we are doing, why we are doing this, and why it's useful? Right. And basically make it the problem of the company. Right. I was talking to a CISO recently, and he said, hey, I'm having this trouble getting dev teams to do X or come up with an architecture or whatnot. Right. So my suggestion to him was to just say, hey, why don't you just have talk to an architect in the team that you're trying to change and make it their problem, like have them come up with the right solution that then you can provide input to, right? So you're kind of flipping and saying, can the organization come up with a better solution? And every time I've done that, the solution has been 10x better than what me or my team could come up with.
That's great. I love that. That's interesting. I think one of the questions we get very often that people ask and like say, hey, when you're on the podcast where someone asks this, getting buy-in from the top down. Right. Because we find a lot of security programs stall because, let's say, the CEO doesn't either understand, doesn't want to spend money, doesn't want to take the project. So, I got a 2-part question. How important is it top down approval and support in security? And then how do you get it if you're not getting it?
Yeah. I mean, you don't want like a negative energy from top down. That's always detrimental. What I've seen you get from top down is, hey, if you want something, let me know. We are always supportive. It's kind of this passive sort of, hey, we are here to help.
Yep.
But, the fact is they don't know what exactly they need you to help with, right? So if you're a leader, you should basically say, okay, prioritize your program and say, okay, here are the things I need. And then be specific about what help you're asking, right? Like a lot of times I've seen, hey, this leader made this decision X and that was against security or whatnot. I think you have to take it in stride. You have to say, what is the context of the decision? What are they trying to achieve? What are the objectives? And then what input did I provide as a security leader or professional into that process? And was all that taken into account before a decision for or against cybersecurity was made? Right. So you have to kind of participate in the organization because decisions get made all the time and not all decisions will go in your favor, but some will. But you have to make sure that you are providing your voice and your input. So the first thing that I would suggest to people is take it in stride. It's not a binary that, someone made a decision against what you said, that they're against security. That's not the case. Right? You just have to make sure you provide the input and participate. It's an organization. It's just a collection of people, and there are different priorities and different things that need to get done. Right? So that's one thing. And so from a top down, I think you don't want negative energy. If you have negative energy, you need to kind of raise that and basically raise that to the right people. But as long as you don't have negative energy, most leaders I've seen, you can take issues to them and saying, hey, this is what we are not getting done. Here's why it's important objectively. And this is how we need to prioritize and get these things done. And my experience has been that approach generally works. right? It's very, I've seldom encountered someone where I've said, hey, do you think that this security is important, trust is important, here is what we are doing, and somebody says no, right? I almost never have heard that. It's always like the nuance of, oh, some decision here or versus there. And that will always happen. You have to take it in stride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what I would suggest. So there is no binary answer. You have to navigate the organization. And that's the top down. Sorry, I forgot in this. What was your other question?
You kind of covered. Okay. I was asking because you kind of touched on it. I was asking, like, if you don't have it, how do you get it? But your answer was pretty clear. I think it's just that open, honest communication with the C level is what you're saying. That obviously there might be some who never want to help, and then, like you said, that's a negative environment. That might not be the best place for you. But but if you have a good C level, just honestly communicating with them with what you need to make it successful.
That's right. And if you have like 10 executives, right, it's almost like performance review. Almost all of this, right? So you have 10 people you're writing performance for. 2 will be outstanding, 5 will be, meets expectations, and 3 will be below expectations. And this is exactly like that. You have 10 executives, you get 3 that are detrimental and 5 that are in the middle. They'll kind of sway either way, and 2 that are really helpful. And so leverage the ones that are really helpful.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
It sounds like all of the advice that you keep giving keeps centralizing around this one common thread, which seems to be like bidirectional communication or every directional communication, like omnidirectional communication really breaks down and that's why programs don't work, or maybe that's why programs are unsuccessful or never get started because they don't really have that level of communications. Am I kind of picking up on that correctly?
Yeah, and we as security, myself included, most people in this profession tend to be introverts. And that contributes a lot to it, frankly, right? So, So we are like, we are doing our best to protect. We have implemented these programs and controls. But the reach outs are super important, and the transparency, and like make sure your security team is visible, right? And I've been told by prominent PR, one of the prominent PR people I used to really respect a lot, right? There's no such thing as negative PR, right? When you actually reach out to someone, whether that be internal or external, it's PR, it's public relations, right? And you might get negative feedback saying, hey, the security team sucks and they've done this bad. Don't take it to heart, because you can take that and improve. Right. And that's what people are afraid to kind of reach out to a broad audience like employees, because they're afraid of negative feedback. And that's natural. Right. But if you get past that, you'll see massive benefits, because that's exactly what you want to know, how your employees feel about your security organization and what you can change to get them in the fold.
So if a CISO is listening to this podcast, that's where we usually focus. And if you had a moment with each one listening and you can give them, let's say, the top 3 things they should be focusing on right now, what do you think you would tell them that they should focus on to help their programs be the best they can be?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I would need more context on sort of their business and what they're facing. Otherwise, it would just be me ranting my priorities or my perceived priorities. And so I would ask them, I would try to understand, if they ask me, I would try to understand what business they are in, what challenges they're facing, and then give them the advice that corresponds to what the business is, what risks they're dealing with, and tell them to prioritize. And I would always tell them, hey, reach out to your employees, be more visible than the other way, right? And whenever I have done that in my past, that's yielded better results. Even though it takes longer, it's amorphous, you will get a lot of blowback, but that actually improves the stature of the security organization. That's what I would tell them. But I wouldn't just tell them that. I would try to understand their business, right? Because what they should focus on is something that they have to, it depends on their business. Right?
Again, it comes back to what Ryan said, is that it seems like a lot of your answers really involve good communication.
Yeah.
And that's really going to make any organization better, is by being a good communication based company.
Yeah, and also be like visible, right? So most security teams are invisible. And invisible security is good to a certain extent, as long as infrastructure, it's like controls that just work by default. That's great. Sure. But it's not good when you're dealing with people.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I love the message you said before. We're big into, even though we focus on the human side, you need the technology to be there, but you need them both working together, not against each other. Right. Yeah. So I really love that. A lot of people that have ended up in places like you, like working with really great companies and having this really great career, have had many mentors through their time. Can you think of maybe one or two that really affected you, that you wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for those folks?
Oh, hands down, it's my wife. So if it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't be sitting here. So
that's awesome.
It's not a professional mentor, it's a personal mentor.
Oh, that's great.
She's been there through thick and thin, like as an advisor, as like someone who encourages me to do what I do. And that's the most important thing in life, right? So if you don't have that personal support, you can't excel professionally.
I think you may be the first person that has ever come on this podcast and named a spouse as their mentor. That's pretty awesome, Ganesh. I really love that. Just curious, is your wife in security also, or is she? No. So isn't that great? Yeah. So you have this wonderful mentor that has a whole different perspective. Yeah. Because she's not even in the same field, right?
That's right.
I love that, because I actually have said that before myself in interviews that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my wife either. She's the person who I run everything by, exactly. and she's always got the insight and input, and that's made us a great team for almost 30 years now, if you can believe that. Boy, I'm old.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. 29 years this month. That's my anniversary. I can't believe it.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah. And our listeners love to read. So it doesn't have to be about the topic. It could be any book, but have you read any books recently that you thought, wow, this is great, I want to recommend this to somebody?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend all your viewers read How to Think Like a Rocket Scientist by Ozan Varol, if you haven't. Amazing book. First principles thinking, how to kind of get out of your comfort zone. And that's what we all humans struggle with time and time again, taught from a rocket scientist perspective in a simplified way. So yeah, that's an amazing book that I've read recently.
I haven't read that one, so I love it. I love getting recommendations that we haven't heard of yet, because that adds to my reading list, and that sounds like a really good one. If people want to follow you or interact with you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Oh, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's easy way. I have Twitter handle as well, but I'm more active on LinkedIn than Twitter. That's it. And then Anzenna.ai is the company website. So you can go there and learn about what we are doing. So
perfect. So I'll make sure the links to that are in the show notes. So before we conclude, tell us a little bit about the new company. So at the beginning, when you got to your career, you told us and now you started your new organization. Tell us, what does that do? What does that organization do?
Yeah. So, so what we are doing is we are revolutionizing the cyber awareness, what we call awareness training, right? And I think, training is just one part of what needs to happen. Like I mentioned, we need to kind of figure out how to systematically engage with employees. And that is what we are building as a product, is how do we enable organizations to systematically engage with employees when it comes to cybersecurity, contextual, systematic, so that the training can be contextual. The engagement is exactly related to what an individual is doing. So for example, if an employee shares a document that is flagged by a DLP to contain sensitive information, that's the best time to engage with the employee that shared that document. And say, hey, you know what? Like, this is a better way to do it. Here is a quick training snippet of how to do this more better. And here is a quick way to undo it if this was a mistake. Because most people do these things as a mistake, right? And so we build a system that basically figures out what an employee is doing, like build a security posture for every employee as they work, and then allow security teams to set workflows that then engage employees on those issues directly in their workflow, like Slack and Microsoft Teams, so that they don't have to learn something new to kind of figure out the security thing. It's in how they work.
And how is the content that the employee receives consumed? Is it like video, audio, text?
All of the above. So that depends on the customer, right? Mm-hmm. So all of our employee experience is on systems, tools like Slack and Teams. So
it sounds like a really smart way of going, as opposed to, like you said, the once a year, watch this 20-minute video that everyone hates. And then you check the box saying, okay, we're secure. When maybe some of that doesn't even affect me because I don't do that for a living. So I'm not on the phone. So I don't need to worry about that part of it. I only deal with email kind of thing or something like that.
Yeah. And even that 20-minute video can be done in 1 to 2 minute chunks. That's much more engaging, topic by topic based, that then people can just consume on a weekly basis or, twice a month or so on and so forth, right? Even that can be changed by making simple tweaks.
So if people want more information on that, they can go to Anzenna.ai, right?
Yeah, Anzenna.ai.
Anzenna.ai. So that's great. Yeah. So we'll put that link in the show notes too. That sounds really fascinating, and it does sound like a whole new way of managing cybersecurity training. So hopefully that will take off, because it sounds like it can have some really good effect on people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on the show today and sharing all your knowledge, your wealth of knowledge from all the experiences you've had, and connecting with our audience and us. And it's really great to hear people preaching the same message that we have been in the way that we deal with people and companies. So it was really great getting to meet you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Chris and Ryan. Thank you for having me on the show. Great questions drive great conversation. So thank you for all the great questions.
Yeah. And thank you all for joining Ganesh and Ryan and I on this month's episode of the Security Awareness Series. We'll see you next month with another professional in the cyberspace. We'll get to learn from them too. Until then, stay safe and secure. See you.